Sound check. Sound check. Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Nathan Thompson with the Wellness Way, Yorkville. Happy Monday, guys. I hope you guys had a great weekend. I hope you guys had a productive weekend as well. I know I was at a lot of volleyball games. We went to an apple orchard. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll be able to see some pretty funny pictures in regards to that as well. So, tonight's broadcast, if you're watching right now, make sure that you say hello. Let me know where you're watching from. I love to see people watching from all across the United States, even into Europe, different parts of the world. So, just let me know where you're watching from. I always love to see the response that I get from that. And also, let me know if the sound is okay. Sometimes the sound cuts in and out. So, if you can hear me okay, also give me a thumbs up. So, hi, Amy. It's great to see you guys. All right. So I did a reel last week. The number one mineral that people are deficient in, and I asked them describe the symptoms. I said, "What do you think that mineral is that you're deficient in?" And I got a whole lot of responses and a whole lot of wrong responses, and that's okay. I appreciate people's participation, but a lot of people said, "Oh, it's selenium, it's zinc, it's iodine, it's salt," and I would agree that a lot of people are deficient in a lot of those things. But I'm going to tell you pretty confidently the number one mineral that you're deficient in, and it's not even close. So I'm going to talk about this with you, and in fact, I'm going to give you the answer because people are like, "What's the answer for it?" And the answer is potassium. So, on tonight's broadcast, I'm going to talk about potassium, what it is, symptoms of having low potassium, how much that the average person should be getting, and also some of the best sources of food potassium. And leave a comment if you can, what you think the best source of potassium is. And I'll give you a hint. It's not even bananas. Although that's what most people will they'll say that the best source of potassium is bananas, and it's not. So I'm going to show you the best sources of potassium. And make sure, guys, that you stick around to the very end because I have an interesting post that's coming up on a 3-year delta from an interesting individual. So you'll see me get a little bit fired up at the end. So if you want to see Dr. Nate fired up, make sure you watch this all the way to the end. So let's talk about potassium, okay? Now, guys, this is absolutely critical. If you're from the Chicagoland area, make sure that you register for our next upcoming inflammation event. This is going to be on Tuesday, October 29th. This is an in-person event at our office at 6 o'clock p.m. One of the reasons why we talk about inflammation so much, because that's the first thing that you need to start lowering down is inflammation. People think it's just more turmeric or taking a bunch of herbs or supplements in order to lower inflammation. Nope. It's actually certain things based off of testing that you can very confidently do to lower inflammation in order to help people start to feel better. But inflammation is actually the spark that leads to every single chronic disease out there. And in fact, if you look at medicine and you look at what we do, medicine and what we do actually agree. that inflammation is a spark that leads to every single chronic degenerative illness that's out there. In fact, if you look and see what medicine is trying to do, is they're trying to lower inflammation, but the approach that we take is vastly different. So if you're suffering with weight loss resistance, cancer, problems with conceiving, thyroid issues, arthritis, type 2 diabetes, autoimmunity, hormone imbalance, any other issues that are going on, please make sure that you get registered for our next event, our next inflammation event, which is going to be coming up here in just 2 weeks from tomorrow, actually. And how you do that is if you are watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Rumble, if you're watching on Facebook, if you just go to the top of the page, you'll see that link tree on there. And then all you do is click on that link, and then you will see the very first thing that comes up is the inflammation event. So if you click that link, it's going to take you over to Eventbrite. You'll be able to register for that event in probably about 60 seconds. The only thing that we ask you is if you register for that event, please make sure that you are a person who is true to their word, and please make sure that you show up for that event. We'll be reaching out to you to confirm that as well. But this is the first step that you take, especially if you want to work with us in the wellness way approach in order to becoming restored. We don't want to manipulate. What we want to do is we want to restore people back to health. And the inflammation event is an awesome event to bridge the gap between where you're at and where you need to start heading as well. So please make sure that you get registered for that. Okay. Now, before I get into actual potassium and go over the science behind it, this is actually something that showed up in my email. And here's what's so interesting about this, because this right here, this is factual. This is not misinformation or disinformation. This has actually been fact checked, and this actually comes out as factually correct. Okay. And in fact, one of the biggest things is guys, a lot of people, when they say misinformation, disinformation, they just say it's misinformation because they don't agree with it. Therefore, it's misinformation. But the thing is there's a lot of stuff out there, and it's tough to kind of navigate between those two. But this is an interesting study that came out of Helio News. And here's what it said. Study shows benzoyl peroxide products on store shelves may already contain benzene. You might say, well, what on earth is benzene? Why does it matter? Well, benzene is a carcinogen, and it's associated with leukemia. This is why, guys. And in fact, when you saw the end of this article, the expert said it's nothing to be alarmed about, because it's just a little bit. And I'm like, well, think of this. We are constantly under assault from toxicity in so many different areas, from the food we eat, the drinks, when we go to the medical doctor, medications, things like that. And it's no wonder when people are a certain age, especially women, why they're having such a hard time with hormone metabolism, why they're having such a hard time with fatty acid metabolism, and why they just don't feel very good. And think of the toxic onslaught from multiple different sources. And that's why I don't agree with when people say, well, it's just one thing from just a little source and your liver does it for free. And I'm like, yeah, we'll take that from 257 different sources, get a little bit, and eventually the body won't be able to keep up with it as well. But in this study, that's factually correct. They say that a total of 111 benzoyl peroxide products that are stored at room temperature were substantially contaminated with benzene. 38 of 111 products contain benzene concentrations that exceeded the FDA's limit. Why on earth would you use benzoyl peroxide? Well, I used a heck of a lot of it because I had acne growing up. You would use that in order to kill off bacteria on the face, and people primarily use it for acne. What's interesting is I use this stuff all the time, and it never helped. I mean, it just never, ever helped. But this is now the new thing that's coming out is that, guys, high amounts of benzenes or benzene toxicity, and any toxicity for that matter, has the potential to really start to destroy the bone marrow. That's why if you look at that, one of the biggest toxins that people do is chemotherapy, and how it actually destroys stem cells, destroys bone marrow. And this is why, guys, toxicity, there's certain things that are very sensitive to toxicity. One of them is, in fact, the bone marrow. And if you keep damaging the bone marrow, this is why this is associated with leukemia as well. So on the topic of acne, very quickly, that's one of the things, because, when we look at acne, if a person is willing to put in the work and is willing to see it through, we've seen tremendous people recover from acne. Biggest thing that I would say about acne is that it's an inside job. It's not a problem on your skin. It's a problem inside of the body. So that's why one of the things that you have to start handling is inflammation. You have to look at bacterial overgrowth, especially when you're talking about the skin, and also that it could be coming from other barriers, specifically the gastrointestinal system. You also have to look at androgens. This is particular to women because women, by nature and by their hormones, they have thinner skin, which means they're going to be a lot more sensitive to hormone fluctuations. But in fact, if a woman has high androgens, think PCOS, you'll oftentimes see it correlates with having acne and things like that. Androgens actually will make the hair follicle produce a lot more oil, which just acts as this like a catcher for all kinds of bacteria to create an inflammatory response. And then finally, you have to also look at deficiencies like vitamin A. And this is why someone has issues with acne, why they prescribe retinol, a synthetic form of it. Then they have to go and do liver testing because it's very damaging, toxic to the kidneys. It's in synthetic form. But you have to make sure that this individual is actually getting enough vitamin A, which is why liver can be so important as well. Acne is an inside job. It's not a skin issue, but it's the reflection of the skin, in fact, and what's happening internally as well. But a lot of people are just worried about what they need to be putting on their skin and things like that. And I'm like, guys, skin, if you look at the Swiss watch principle of skin, there's other way more factors than just what you are putting on your skin. And that's what everyone looks at is they just look at a this for that approach, including dermatologists as well. Okay. All right, so let's talk about potassium, guys. And again, if you're watching, please make sure that you say hello. Let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing where everybody is. I try to respond to as many people as possible. If I don't, nothing against you. It's just I just don't happen to get to it. Running a lot of social media, being in a full-time practice, having a family, there's a lot of gears that are turning. But let's talk about potassium and why this is one of the biggest deficiencies that people have. Now, on the topic of potassium, I'm going to ask you this question. Do you get 3,000 to 4,000 milligrams of potassium every day? Maybe even more than that, because it's going to depend on a lot of different factors, whether you're a child, whether you're adult, how big you are, your activity levels, things like that. And the biggest thing I can tell you is that there's a lot of people that don't even get 3,000 milligrams of potassium. But why should that matter? Why is that important? I'm going to go over that in just a second. So if you look at what is potassium, and yes, this is actually done by a registered dietitian, and it was also medically reviewed and fact-checked to make sure that it's accurate. So what on earth is potassium? Potassium is an essential mineral that is critical to a lot of body functions, including, now listen to this, delivery of nerve signals, which means it's very important for the heart, contraction of muscles, which is very important for the heart, regulation of heartbeat and blood pressure, again, very important for the heart, movement of nutrients into cells and removal of cellular waste, which is very important if you suffer with a lot of swelling and edema and have like a puffy face and things like that. So potassium is involved with so many different functions inside the body. Now, how much potassium is needed per day can differ depending on the individual. The recommended daily intake for the average adult is 4,700 milligrams. And I just said, do you get 3,000 to 4,000 per day? Chances are you probably don't even get that. And here's what they say, although doses of 1,600 to 2,000 milligrams a day may be adequate for some adults. And I'm going to show you why I don't agree with that as well. And they say that potassium deficiency is very, very rare. And I'm going to also talk about, this is why they probably don't even know if people do have a potassium deficiency or not. But on that topic, this is what's so interesting. This is how you know if someone's coming from a medical perspective, okay? Now, let me ask you a question. Do you want to be smart or just not stupid? Do you want to be rich or just not poor? Do you want to be healthy or just not sick? And this is one of the biggest things when I ask people, hey, is your health important to you? They're like, it's everything. I'm like, great. Tell me what the definition of health is, and nobody can answer it right. A lot of times when people say, what is health? They're like, the absence of disease. Well, let me ask you a question. How many times have you have felt like garbage and you go to your doctor to get labs and they come back, give you a high five and like, your labs are normal? Well, the reason why is because what medicine really does and what it really offers is they don't do anything until you have a fire. There's a difference between having no fires and actually being healthy. That's why when we do testing, we go so much deeper in order to look and see what's developing inside of the body. But medicine truly is just about not being sick, meaning there are no fires. And this is why I talk about this at the inflammation talk when I say, hey, are your kids healthy? And people are like, yeah, they're not healthy. There's no, and I say, no, they're not. There's just, they don't have any fires going on, or at least fires that you don't know of, as well. So medicine is really just about not being sick and about not having any fires. And that's why you have to start looking at things a lot deeper. There's a difference between being healthy and just not sick. There's a difference between being rich and just not poor. There's a difference between, being smart and just not stupid. Okay. Everybody says, well, I want to be smart. I want my kids to be smart. And I'm like, well, are they smart? Or are they just not stupid? Big difference between the two. So let's go to the National Institutes of Health, and they talk about potassium. Okay. What is potassium and what does it do? Potassium is a mineral found in many foods. Your body needs for potassium for almost everything it does, including proper kidney and heart function, muscle contraction, and nerve transmission. And in fact, you look over to the right, you look at the recommended amount, and you can actually see that it's still not that much. But you'll see the recommended amount. The main thing I wanted to show this to you differs based on how old someone is, whether they're an adult, whether they're a man, whether they're a woman. But even for an adult, 19 plus years for men, they even have it at 3,400 milligrams, almost 3.5 grams of potassium every single day. And I would hedge my bets to say that most people don't even get that every single day. Okay. So what are some of the symptoms of potassium deficiency? What are some of the symptoms of potassium deficiency? Interesting enough, I'm going to go over this in just a little bit, is that you really can't measure it in the blood, even though they do measure it in the blood. But most of your potassium is stored within the cell, which is why you really can't get an accurate measurement of where you're at. But here are some symptoms of potassium deficiency: weakness and fatigue. Okay. Weakness and fatigue. Digestive problems like constipation. Remember, this is involved with muscle function. And in order for your bowels to move, the smooth muscle has to be able to contract. So constipation, heart palpitations. Have you ever looked at AFib, atrial fibrillation? This is very, very important. That's why I always look at a mineral problem more than anything else. Because if you look at atrial fibrillation, most of these people who have it are woefully inadequate when it comes to potassium, especially. And what's so interesting is that if you have any kind of blood sugar issues or fatty liver or things like that, then that problem actually can become compounded as well. High blood pressure, and I have that star because I'm going to go over that in just a second. But if you are potassium deficient, it can actually cause high blood pressure. Tingling and numbness, brain fog, muscle cramps, aches, and spasms. Fatty liver. So potassium deficiency is actually associated with fatty liver. Here's what's also interesting: low insulin secretion. So if you're going, this is why we always measure insulin. But if your blood sugars are running high, but your insulin is running kind of low, it's like, well, maybe you might be potassium deficient. Loss of muscle mass, which is really important, especially as people get older, but then also edema or water retention. These are all symptoms of potassium deficiency. So potassium plays so many roles when it comes to your body, this one essential mineral that so many people are actually deficient in. Okay. Now, this comes from the Hellenic Journal of Cardiology just about 4 to 5 months ago. And the title of it is Effect of the DASH versus Mediterranean Diet, accompanied by a salt restriction on metabolic syndrome, cardiometabolic risk factors in adults with high normal blood pressure or grade 1 hypertension, secondary analysis of randomized control trial. So I know that's a lot of words here, but basically what they're looking at is they're looking at the effect of the DASH diet. And this is the DASH diet is a specific diet. Mediterranean diet is also another specific diet, but it focuses on the restriction of salt, especially when it comes to lowering your blood pressure. Because have you guys ever seen that medical doctors just demonize salt all the time and say that salt is bad, salt is bad, salt is the reason why you have so many problems? And I'm going to show you it's not the salt, it's the potassium. And one of the reasons why I want to talk about this is because I remember when I was younger and in incredible shape, college athlete, I always, I would take my blood pressure and it would always sit high. So my systolic, the top number, would always be at 135 or something like that. And I'm like, that's so weird. Why on earth is that? And my the diastolic number, the lower number would be at like 75 or 80. And one of the things I look back on, I was probably so potassium deficient because I basically ate like an a-hole. All right. I really did. Ate a tremendous amount of food. They include a lot of junk food, a lot of sugary sodas, things like that. But I could hide it because I would burn it off through my activity. The only problem is when I would stop that activity, boom, the weight would just come right on. And we're talking a lot in a short amount of time. But I guarantee you, just the way that I ate, I was probably very potassium deficient, even though people think I'm going to lower my blood pressure and I'm going to restrict my salt and I'm going to get in a better shape, lose some weight, and things like that. Well, I had high blood pressure and I, was sitting at about 10% body fat. I wasn't overweight or anything like that. So they looked at the DASH diet, and here's what I want to show you. Now, here's the effects of the study diets on systolic blood pressure. So they looked at just restricting salt, lower blood pressure, by 7.6 millimeters of mercury. The salt restriction and the DASH diet, by about 12 millimeters of mercury. And then the salt restriction and Mediterranean diet, and it lowered systolic blood pressure by about 15 points. And you're like, oh, well, that's good. Maybe we should all use that diet in order to lower our blood pressure. But here's the thing. If you look further into the study, here's one of the things is that you look at the control groups and how much sodium that they consume per day. And yes, there's a lot of added sodium and a lot of junk food and things like that. But if you look at the DASH diet and look at the Mediterranean diet, here's what's so interesting is that if you look at what they did is you can see that in both groups, they significantly increased their potassium intake. So you can see that they significantly increased their potassium intake. In fact, if you look at the Mediterranean diet versus the control groups, they increased their potassium by a gram every single day. And that's one of the things that they don't mention. And I believe it's one of the dirty secrets of cardiology because they talk about the Mediterranean diet, they talk about the DASH diet and things like that. Nor do they ever mention that maybe the problem is that you're eating better food, so you're automatically going to be getting more potassium. So the biggest thing that I want to tell you is this, and I've done some live videos on this in the past. You can go ahead and search those out. The problem isn't salt. The problem really is potassium. It really is potassium. And in fact, when they're saying you should get 4,700 milligrams per day, that's going to come out to 7 to 12 cups of vegetables per day. And that depends on the type of vegetable that you are actually eating. What's so interesting is less than 2% of Americans meet this requirement. Less than 2% of Americans are getting 4,700 milligrams of potassium per day, or are they eating 7 to 10, 12 cups of vegetables every single day? Less than 2%. And this is why when I looked at kids, and I had mentioned this probably several months ago, looked at kids and they looked at 700 kids, and literally out of 700 kids, only 3 of them were getting the required amount of fiber in their diet every single day. And yes, I don't care how carnivore you are, fiber long-term is something essential that you need within your diet in order to help feed the microbiome for short-chain fatty acid production that are helping with energy, that are helping with blood sugar control, that are helping with so many different things. But less than 2% of Americans are meeting this requirement of getting enough potassium every single day. And in fact, is your doctor even talking to you about this? Now, let me ask you a question. If you're getting, depending on what you're eating, 7 to 12 cups of vegetables every single day, can you get that with time restricted eating? So, people are like, oh, I just eat 1 meal a day or OMAD, and I do that, and I feel fantastic. And I'm like, okay, great. Are you getting enough potassium every single day? Chances are, nope, you can't get that if you're doing 1 meal a day or if you're, getting all your food in within 4 hours. And in fact, a lot of times I tell people you need to be getting more protein in. And can you get 100 to 200 grams of protein if you are time restricted eating, or if you're only getting 1 meal a day? And that's one of the things, and how a lot of times my opinion will change, about that is looking at the nutrient requirements that's required by the human body and how hard it is in order to get those nutrients in with just 1 meal a day or doing time restricted eating or something like that, unless you have a very specific supplement plan that you're adhering to. Okay. Now, when it comes to potassium, this is what I always will say. You cannot test, you must guess. You cannot test potassium, you must guess. And the reason why is that 98% of potassium is stored within the cells and it's not ending up within your blood. It's stored in red blood cells. It's stored, within the nerve system, and it's just within the cells, and so it's not going to show up within the blood. And I know what you're thinking, but Dr. Nate, but my potassium was high in a blood test. Well, again, most of your potassium, 98% of it, is stored within the cell. So what happens if it shows up on a blood test? Well, one of the things is that your potassium will go elevated if you have some kind of muscle injury. Potassium become elevated if you have diarrhea or something like that. Your potassium can also be elevated. Here's what's interesting: is if you go ahead and draw your blood and you damage some red blood cells, which store a lot of potassium, and then you suck the blood up into the syringe in order to take your blood, and then they measure it as having high potassium. That's why when I look at people and they have high potassium on their blood work, and I match it to their kidney function, things like that, I'm like, you know what? You don't have high potassium. You just damaged some red blood cells when they did the blood draw. Okay. Because 98%, let me say that again before you argue, 98% is stored within the cells. And that's why the blood measurement is not very accurate. Okay. Now, what are some high potassium foods? So go ahead and put in the comments, what do you think some of the most highest potassium foods are? And I know that what people are going to say is bananas, and it's not bananas, not by a long shot. Bananas are not the highest potassium foods. So here are some of the highest potassium foods that you should be getting in your diet. And quite honestly, some of them taste really, really bad. The highest potassium food are beet greens. They don't taste very well, just as an FYI. Beet greens, white kidney beans, avocados, very high potassium food, although you probably need to eat 10 of them per day in order to get your daily potassium requirements. Swiss chard, salmon contains potassium, coconut water, which is a good, when as far as, should I take electrolytes or something? Coconut water is probably one of the best. Spinach, Brussels sprouts, acorn squash, sweet potatoes, and then finally at number 11, it's bananas. And then yes, mushrooms and tomatoes do have some potassium associated with them. But you'll see the bananas are actually really far down on the list, but everybody thinks that bananas are the best source of potassium, and they're just not. Okay. Now, can you supplement with potassium? The answer is yes, you can. Do I supplement with potassium? Yes. And in fact, I'll take 6 to 10 potassium pills every single day. And you know why I do that? Because I actually don't eat that much until dinner. I don't eat that much, and I know that I just don't eat. I don't eat 7 to 12, servings of vegetables every single day. I just don't. All right. So I will take potassium in a supplement form, no doubt about it. Okay. So today I've taken 6 to 7. I've gotten 1,500 milligrams of potassium just in supplement form. I'll get more when I eat dinner, but it's very hard in order to be getting 4,700 milligrams of potassium every single day. I'll probably go home and take a little bit more potassium. So in that case, and I know that my needs are going to change day to day. And this is why I love when people are like, oh, you only need this much amount of iodine. And I'm like, well, that is going to change on day to day because your day is not the same. Your stress levels are not the same. Activity levels are not the same. Everything changes. Okay. So can you take potassium? Yes, I take potassium citrate. And I take, in 250 milligram capsules, and I've already taken 6 to 7 today. I'll probably take some more before I go home as well. So yes, you can take potassium. This is why I went over it, is try to get it from food, because a lot of the foods that I went over, not only they have potassium, but they have a lot of other things in them as well. And that's why you should be focusing on your diet, not, oh, what tastes good. It's like, what does the body need in order to carry out its basic metabolic functions as well. So guys, I hope that helps you with potassium. Now I'm going to show you an interesting slide. Okay. So this right here, it says this, and we're coming up on a, basically like a 3-year delta. And if you know what I mean by delta, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But this actually showed up, and someone had sent this to me, and it's this. Often it's the chiropractors and the MLMers, multi-level marketers, who are not even a little qualified to give nutrition advice, but are selling you unregulated supplements and shaming you into staying unvaccinated. Someone sent this to me. I looked at this, and the first thing that came to my mind was, this is really weird. This is a really weird post. And I blocked out who this was coming from because I don't want people to go and bully her because she wouldn't be able to stand it. Because immediately after she sent this, she got so much backlash that she made all of her social media accounts private. And I looked at this and I was like, really, this was just really weird because who would go back, go back like several years, 3 to 4 years on Instagram and stalk someone's Instagram profile, take screenshots, and then make this. This is just really, really bizarre. I will tell you this. If I was her husband, I would tell her to slow her roll, but I never would be her husband. You know why? Because is a very difficult and petulant person. I would never ever, I would never ever entertain the idea of being married to this woman because my life probably right now would be miserable. But that's what's just so interesting because she just hated the fact that I talked about science and everything that I've done. Go ahead and go back. You can go ahead and fact check everything that I've done, but I haven't been wrong on a lot of things. I've been wrong on some things, but I have not been wrong on a lot of things. But that's, the reason why, in effect, if you look at this right here, you see the Mandate Burpees shirt. She did not like that, at all. And which means that she's probably very vaccinated. And I would probably assume too, unfortunately, she's probably very sick, probably has some problems with, fertility issues, probably has some other issues, as well as fact as her, having the jibby jab, and thinking that she's doing a great service for humanity. Well, in fact, the only thing that she's done is made herself and made her family very sick as well. And this is how I responded. Okay. And I want you to pay very close attention to this. This guy right here, he's so glad that I didn't listen to you. He's so glad that I didn't listen to you. And this is my youngest son, and his name is Elias. And if you understand the story of how this child was conceived and born, he's almost 2 years of age. He is an absolute joy in our life. And he's so glad that I didn't listen to your petulant bickering. He's so glad that I said, I'm not listening to that. Because you know what's so interesting is over the last 5 years, I have spent hours upon hours learning, studying, researching in order to become the best doctor possible for my patients. But you know what? One of the reasons why this little child was conceived was because if you understand the story of my wife and how she got very sick several years ago, is that once she got her health back, she was able to conceive and we were able to have our fourth child. And I talk a lot about this story at our inflammation event. That's why I want you guys to be there as well, because it just gives you hope. So he's very glad that he didn't listen to that little petulant child, who says that you're not qualified in order to do those things. Now guess, you know what? I am not qualified, but God doesn't call the qualified. You know what he calls? He calls the willing. And this is why so many people, they're so concerned, with credentialism, that's their new God. They worship credentialism. And the reason why is because there's a lot of educated idiots that are out there who you could literally tell them how to climb themselves out of a paper bag and they would need directions on how to do it. There's a lot of educated idiots out there, but God doesn't call the qualified. He calls the willing. And several years ago, I was very unqualified, but I decided to make a change. And people ask me, well, how did you like that? Why did you become a Wellness Way doctor? And you know what I say? I had to, because my wife was very sick and she was struggling. And so I thought, I don't know how to get her better, but I'm going to learn it and I'm going to work on getting her better. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a Wellness Way doctor and why our office is called the Wellness Way Yorkville. I owe a lot to the Wellness Way approach towards restoring health, not manipulating health, which is something that she probably does a lot of. Just think of this. Here's a final thought. Great minds discuss ideas. Average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people. So you're going to know who's got a small mind. And to think about this, the only thing that I always talk about is I talk about ideas, especially. So I don't bring other people up. And this is the last time that I'm ever going to say that, but this is just the anniversary. So I just wanted to just bring that up just a little bit. Okay. All right. So our inflammation event is coming up again Tuesday, October 29th at 6:00 p.m. This is an in-person event. If you're from the Chicagoland area, you want to work with the Wellness Way Yorkville, you want to work with me directly, then get to that event, especially if people have weight loss resistance, issues with the immune system, infertility, thyroid issues, arthritis, blood sugar issues, autoimmune disease, and hormone issues, please get registered for that event to start looking at a different approach. Okay. A different approach. Now, let me ask you a question. Everything that I went over is all fact based, all research based. Does that make me qualified in order to give nutritional advice? All right. And what you can do is just go to our Linktree page and you'll be able to register right up there. You'll see inflammation event, work with me in person. Get registered for that. I'll take you over to Eventbrite. You can register for that in just a couple of minutes. So make sure that you get registered for that. And then you remember this shirt? Remember that shirt that I had, right there? This is one of the most popular shirts that we've ever done. And you can actually order that shirt, Mandate Burpees. If you go to Linktree, you'll see order your t-shirt on demand. So you'll order that shirt, order the size. We have men's and women's styles. You can even probably order a special color for it as well. When you order it, it will then get made and then shipped directly to you. So you'll have that within a couple of weeks after you order it. It's really, really awesome. Okay. So make sure that you support us by getting a t-shirt, especially if you're watching from different areas where I can't connect with you on a one-on-one basis. But make sure you support our efforts with social media and getting the message out and getting a different idea and a different perspective out there as well. So you're probably deficient in this mineral by a lot. And what is it? It's potassium. Okay. It's potassium. So start getting more sources of potassium. And I want you to start by getting good sources coming from your diet, because not only does it have potassium, but it's got other things that are in there that are going to help you on your journey towards better health, especially. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this broadcast. I hope you share it with other people. And just make sure that if you don't, please follow our page and please follow us. You can follow us on YouTube. You can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram, Dr. Nathan Thompson, and follow us on there. We're always trying to put out good content for you, things that make sense, and things that, yes, they might be, deemed as misinformation, but in reality, what it is, it's true information. It's just missing information that people just don't agree with. So potassium, probably deficient in it. So get to it and start getting good sources of potassium, especially. So guys, I hope you have a great night. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Be well, be blessed, and let me know where you're watching from again. But I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I hope you always remember who you are. And just remember, on your journey to good health, just make sure that you never give up and that you keep going. So be well, be blessed. I love all of you, and we'll talk to you guys next week.